Yeah, baby. That right there is the Windows 2000 startup sound. Is Windows 2000 the best operating system mankind has ever produced? Does it beat the current reigning champion of MS-DOS 6.22? I'm going through every operating system, at least every major version of every operating system, ranking them all on a score of 0 to 50 in 5 distinct categories: enjoyability, polish, immortality, importance, and the all-important wildcard category. And I'm ranking each of them using those exact same criterias, as flawed as they may be, and determining which of all the operating systems that mankind has created is the best. This is Windows 2000. This is when... Wait a minute, one more time. Yeah, that's good stuff. And just for good measure, let's get the ding in there too. Oh, a nice... Oh, what's happening there? No. We want a ding. Yeah, ding. All right. This is Windows 2000. Now, this is a somewhat interesting one for me to talk about, because I actually worked on this one. Not any of the core components, mind you, but I worked in a part of Microsoft that handled e-commerce stuff and things like that, and Windows 2000 was a key part of that. So I worked on Windows 2000 back when it was called NT5, and then it got renamed to Windows 2000. This, of course, being the successor to Windows NT4, which was kind of the... Windows NT4 was the first Windows NT that had that Microsoft Windows 95 look, that Explorer from Windows 95, and Windows 2000 just kind of continued to improve upon that. And I actually rather like Windows 2000, and not just because I worked on it, but it actually, of all the various NT incarnations, it might be one of my favorites. It's a nice system. It's a clean system. It's a fairly peppy and stable system. You really could do a lot worse than Windows 2000 when you're sitting around saying, I'm going to have a classic Windows gaming machine, right? Because you can get DirectX on here and everything else, and you can get a nice performant, high quality system that's going to be a lot more stable than, say, one of the 9X series like Windows Millennium Edition or Windows 95 and the like. But I worked on this one for about a year, and it was actually a lot of fun. So this is running right now inside of a VirtualBox. It's running inside of a virtual machine. When I was working on it, this was back in the late 90s. And so I was testing out Windows 2000 on, dedicated, big towers. Back then, Microsoft got all of their computers from Dell, like all of them. And so we had at Microsoft those generic Dell towers. And everyone had like a million of them. They were just everywhere. But I also was lucky enough to actually get to install this on the alphas, on the DEC alphas, not the alpha quality software, which you could argue about, but the alpha processors. And that was really, really neat for me. I got to install Windows NT5 and then Windows 2000 on alpha machines on a fairly regular basis. And it was kind of cool. It was cool to be able to play around with hardware that most people don't use. It was very, very neat. In the end, alpha support kind of faltered. There's the word I'm going for. And it didn't really go anywhere. But, it shipped, but, whatever. But this is Windows 2000. And here's the thing. It ships with Internet Explorer 5. Here, let's look at this. Internet Explorer 5 from 1999, based on NCSA Mosaic. Yeah, that's what it's based on. Cool. Distributed under a license agreement with Spyglass. Anyway, I'm going to close out this. Renders my website fairly well because my website looks good in almost all web browsers. And the thing about Windows 2000 that I dig is that it's basically from an end user standpoint, you're using Windows 95, right? For most purposes, all the same software from, say, Windows 95 and 98 is going to run, whether it's Office or various web browsers and whatnot. It all runs, and it all runs pretty doggone well. And everything is peppy in here. It's just a fast machine, and it's stable, and it's just nice. I mean, everything is just so nice. And I remember that from back then too. I mean, if you put it on an underpowered machine, you were not going to have the best results. But if you put in a decent amount of RAM, and we're talking, let's say you threw in 64 megs of RAM, 128 megs of RAM, you were in good shape. I believe here, let's see how much RAM did I actually give this virtual machine. I gave this virtual machine, all right, I gave it 265 megs of RAM, because why not? Which is more than adequate. I mean, realistically, you do not need much more than that. Check this out. So again, I'm going to close Internet Explorer here, and I'm going to launch it again. Let's stay offline. It's instantaneous is the thing. Everything is instant. It's really, really a fast system. You want to launch Paint? Boom, you got Paint. Paint launches fast. You want to go in here and launch Pinball. Pinball. It's Pinball, guys. I haven't launched this in years. Oh my heavens. I haven't played Space Cadet Pinball in years. Yeah, Z and slash. Oh, here we go. I forgot about this game. Oh, that's loud. I'm going to close that out. That's too loud. I can't take that. But man, I mean, it ships just like any other version of Windows back then. You get Hyper Terminal, so you can, do a little dial-up BBSing and whatnot. You can do dial-up networking. You got your CD player and your Windows Media Player. You got your basic solitaire, which honestly is like the same solitaire that's been around since like the early versions of Windows. I mean, the Windows 3.1 version of solitaire is almost identical to this version of solitaire. I mean, one of the only real differences you'll see is the about screen. Otherwise, it's like they didn't really change the artwork or the UI or anything. It's fantastic. But this really is a quality system. It's fast and it's stable. The thing that really gets me about it is from a longevity standpoint, from an immortality standpoint of using Windows 2000 in 2019, almost 2 decades after it came out, it is both amazing and horrible. And to kind of make it clear what I mean by that, because of the proliferation of viruses and the like on the Windows platforms, Windows 2000 being so abandoned so long ago, and that you're not getting new security updates and patches, essentially means if you install this system and then you go try to hop online and browse the web and download some stuff, you're going to get some viruses. And then you're going to get more viruses. And then it is going to become a nightmare. But if you keep this as mostly an offline machine, like you can connect it, but then go out and be very selective of, just like transfer some files from another machine, that sort of thing, to get games and applications up and running, you're going to be in okay shape. But you're not going to really be able to use this as an online machine. In fact, because of the extreme amount of virus issues, I would say you're probably better off using an even older operating system like Windows 3.11. I know it's ridiculous. Or an old Mac System 6 or something like that. If you want to go really old, you're going to get less viruses on those machines than you will here. Windows 98 and ME and XP and Windows 2000 and all of them, you go online with those, you're going to get flooded with viruses. That's just going to happen. It's part of the downside of most versions of Windows. But so that makes it difficult to use it nowadays. Though honestly, it's less of a problem now than it was, say, 5 years ago, because people are attacking Windows 2000 specific systems less and less often because they become less and less common. The less common you have of a system, the less likely it is that someone's going to be trying to break into your system. It's just the reality. And if people are looking to spread viruses and malware and Trojans and blah blah blah, they're looking for high impact targets, meaning systems that are installed on lots of different machines or on high value machines. And the reality is, if I'm installing Windows 2000 or you're installing Windows 2000, odds are we're probably doing it to play games from around that period of time, where we would normally install like a Windows 98 machine, but Windows 2000 gives us a little more stability and just it makes it a little nicer experience in my personal opinion. However, all that said, this system runs really well on most modern hardware. Drivers can become an issue, especially when you're talking graphics drivers. I'd almost say that you're better off putting Windows 2000 in a virtual machine. But if you get the right graphics drivers for a machine, you can get Windows 2000 up and running on relatively modern hardware, maybe not latest and greatest, but relatively, with relative ease. Not super easy, but it's doable. Plus, because Windows 2000 was so popular, its support within all the various emulators and virtual machines is extremely high, which makes its immortality long-lasting. On the polish side of things, it is an extremely polished version, user interface-wise, of NT4. Windows NT4 was a good system, and Windows 2000 really polished that system. It made it just a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother. It's a nicer user experience than, say, Windows 95 or Windows 98. It is just Microsoft learned what they were doing with this interface type, with the start bar and everything else. And I feel like this, to be honest, for me, was the best user interface of the 9X onward era. And that includes Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, and to a certain extent, Windows 10 as well. This interface is clean, it's simple, it's fast, it's not hard on the eyes, it's somewhat customizable, though not terribly. You end up needing to really go with some third-party software to really get good themes going. Out of the box, the customization options here is pretty limited, but it's doable. And the importance of this system is relatively high. Windows 2000 was the business workstation of Windows, right? I mean, most consumers at this point in time were running Windows 95 and Windows 98, and heaven help them, Windows ME. And then shortly thereafter, Microsoft did the Windows XP push, not long after this. And once people moved over to the NT side of things with Windows XP, they kind of sidestepped Windows 2000. And I think that's a real shame, because honestly, I think Windows 2000 was a better consumer operating system than the 9X series was. And I'm a big fan of DOS. I'm a big fan of Windows 3.1.1. I think it's a fantastic system. I really do, for what it is. But Windows 2000, honestly, it should have been the one. It should have been the king. It really should have. Yeah, I'll show these files. The fact that it wasn't in those days is kind of almost a travesty. I really think it is. It's one of the better operating systems that Microsoft has put out. So its importance is high in that it paved the way for mass adoption of NT, with a little bit with Windows 2000 and then increasingly with XP. So that was important. It was also important from the point of view of from the server standpoint. This was Microsoft really making a big push into the server space. They tried really hard with Windows 2000. Windows 2000 Server, Windows 2000 Back Office, they really pushed with this. This is Windows 2000 Pro, which is kind of more of the workstation-y version of it. But it was an important operating system. Was it as important as DOS or Windows 3.1 or any of those, or Windows 95 even, for Microsoft? No, it really wasn't. I think in some respects, Windows 2000 just gets overlooked. People just jump to XP. And the reality is, a huge amount of the games people would be playing nowadays under XP really run as well, if not even better, under Windows 2000. It's lighter resource load. You're going to get hit with a little bit less of the virus onslaught with 2000 as opposed to XP, just because XP has a much bigger install base. And it's just a better system overall. It's cleaner, it's faster, it's lighter. I also need to give it a few extra points in the wild card category because I worked on it. And I know it so well inside and out. And I worked on this system, and I just like it a lot. I'm gonna put up the score here because boom, this is what I'm giving. I'm giving it 35 or 33 out of 50. Which means it is not defeating DOS 622. MS-DOS 622, let's see, it's scrolling by on the screen right now. It's 36 points, so 3 points higher. I give it a 7 out of enjoyability. A 7 out of 10, because honestly, it is an enjoyable system to use. Honestly, this system is coming below Windows 3.1.1, which had 34 points. And with 33 points, is it tying? I'm waiting for it to scroll by on the screen here because I forgot what scores most of these systems have. So Macintosh System Software 6 got 33 points. Windows 2000 also got 33 points. Honestly, that's about right. Ubuntu 5.10 got 30 points, which means Windows 2000, I gave more points than Ubuntu 5.10. I'm going to hear about that. All right, so but enjoyability, it's an enjoyable system to use. And part of that is that everything is fast, it's peppy, it's lightweight, and because of that, it's just kind of fun. I gave it a 7 out of 10 on polish because honestly, it's polished for what it is. It's not the most polished operating system I've ever seen, not by a long shot. But for the Windows 9X series of Explorer, that Chicago-y look with the start button and everything else, I think Windows 2000 was as polished as it got. Because realistically, as soon as if you play with Windows 2000 for half a day and then jump to Windows XP, you're immediately startled and go, wait a minute, this doesn't feel as polished. It really, really doesn't, especially in the early iterations of XP without the service packs. It just doesn't feel as polished. But on the flip side, it is more polished than NT4, and it is more polished than the user experience of Windows 95A, for example. So I give it a 7 out of 10, which is a respectable score, but maybe not all that hot. For immortality, I gave a 6 for all the reasons I outlined earlier. You're going to get lots of viruses, so I obviously can't give it a 10. Getting drivers on newer systems can sometimes be a challenge, but is actually pretty doable. But it is so fast, and it works so well in so many virtual machines, and you can get it up and running on fairly modern hardware. I give it a 6 out of 10 for immortality. Not great, but not bad. For importance, I gave it a 7 out of 10 because it's a pretty important system, but it's not critical. It's not vitally important for Microsoft or the industry. If Windows 2000 never existed, the industry wouldn't be all that fundamentally different. Certain product lines wouldn't have evolved quite the way they did, but I think that's where it ends. And it's the fact that those product lines ultimately have such a high level of importance. I feel like you have to give Windows 2000 its credit where it's due. I give it a 7. And I give it 6 points in the wild card scale because I worked on it. I don't know if my name's in here anywhere. You know, it's sometimes you might be able to find Easter eggs. There's a few things where you can find Easter eggs and various old Microsoft products with my name in it, but not too many. I don't know if there's any in Windows 2000. I don't think there are. But if there were, I would show them to you, and I would give this a 10 out of 10 for wild card because that would be cool. But no, so I give it a 6 out of 10 for the wild card because I worked on it, and because honestly, as a retro gamer, I also would probably give it a 6 out of 10 simply because it is, in my opinion, the best system to play aging Windows 9X through XP, that era, titles on. It just, in my opinion, doesn't get any better than this. It's not perfect, but neither is XP, and neither is Windows 98 Second Edition, and neither is NT4, and none of them are perfect. They all have their pluses and minuses. They all have compatibility issues with one piece of software over another. But Windows 2000, I felt like, was the best combination of compatibility with that era of software, around the turn of the millennium, and being peppy and being stable. And that's something I think that is really worthwhile. Anyway, so I'm going to give it a 33 out of 50. Congratulations, Microsoft Windows 2000 Pro. You have the same score as Macintosh System Software, 6.0.8, and not quite as high a score as Windows 3.1.1. So, or DOS. That really makes me giggle a little bit. It really, really does. This episode of Lunduke looking at old operating systems brought to you in part by Pogo Linux. Go to pogolinux.com. Look at their workstations. Wait, can you see their workstations behind me? Yeah, here you go. Right here. This is my Tempest. This is my baby. I love this workstation so much. So much. You want your own Pogo workstation? You can go over here and you can actually deck out your own Tempest. You can actually go in here. They got liquid cooled, GPU focused ones, VR focused workstations. Like if you go in here to the liquid cooled section, right? There we go. Tempest, baby. Yeah, they got multiple Tempest towers that you can deck out with an Intel processor, an AMD Ryzen, whatever you want. And man, you can configure it like crazy. And of course, because it's Pogo Linux, come here and check this out. Check this out. You want to put your operating system on? Look at this. Operating system. Giant Tux the Penguin. But you can put on whatever you want. So you can put on Ubuntu or OpenSUSE or Red Hat. But if you want Windows, you know what? They'll install Windows for you. But they're a Pogo Linux, so they got a Giant Tux the Penguin hanging out right there. All right, everybody. So we're adding one more operating system to the chart. Welcome Windows 2000. You are not the winner. DOS 622 reigns supreme. Next up, we're going to tackle Windows 98 Second Edition. Yeah, we're on a Windows roll. I'm trying to get some of the Windows stuff in here before we branch out completely into stuff that, well, most people just haven't ever used. But we're going to hit Windows 98 Second Edition, which was from a time period that was right around Windows 2000. So I think it's going to be interesting to compare Windows 98 to Windows 2000. Spoiler, pretty sure Windows 98 is not going to be in the running for best OS ever. But who knows? We'll see.